When Justice Amy Coney Barrett leaned forward with confidence, expecting to dominate the hearing with her carefully rehearsed argument, she never imagined what was about to unfold. Within seconds, Representative Jasmine Crockett seized the moment, slicing through Barrett's words with surgical precision. Crockett's voice rose with the kind of authority that left no room for doubt. "Your entire premise collapses under the weight of facts," she declared, her tone sharp and unyielding. Gasps rippled across the room as the audience realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. A Supreme Court justice being stripped of her authority not by another judge, but by a relentless congresswoman who refused to bow to titles or robes. In that instant, the balance of power shifted. Barrett's expression faltered, her argument unraveling before it could even take shape. What was supposed to be a showcase of judicial brilliance turned into a public dismantling that left America stunned. The humiliation wasn't just in the loss of words. It was in the swiftness of the defeat, the brutal clarity with which Crockett exposed the cracks. And as the clip spread across social media within minutes, one thing became clear. A legend of untouchable authority had just been shattered in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. The confrontation did not appear out of thin air. It was the culmination of weeks of heated debate surrounding a controversial case that cut deep into the nation's political wounds. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, chosen for her conservative credentials, had stepped into the spotlight to defend a line of reasoning that critics argued would roll back decades of hard-fought protections. She carried herself with the solemn weight of the Supreme Court, speaking as though her robe alone was proof of unshakable authority. But across from her sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, a figure who had built her reputation not on caution, but on fire. Known for tearing apart witnesses with brutal efficiency, Crockett had no patience for evasions or lofty rhetoric. She represented a growing faction of Americans disillusioned with carefully polished arguments that ignored lived realities. Her presence electrified the hearing room before she even spoke. The audience was stacked with tension. Supporters of Barrett whispered about precedent, judicial restraint, and tradition. Crockett's allies leaned forward, eager for a fight, convinced that she alone had the courage to say what millions were thinking but few dared to voice. Cameras rolled, journalists scribbled, and the digital world prepared to pounce on every second. The stage was set as Barrett delivered her opening points, laying out a measured defense of her position. Her words echoed with the formality of the court, quoting past rulings and historical doctrines as though they were unassailable. For a moment, it seemed she held the upper hand, speaking with the calm of someone used to being treated as untouchable. But then, Crockett's microphone lit up, and the room shifted. What began as a legal lecture was about to collide with a force unwilling to play by the old rules. The first words out of Jasmine Crockett's mouth sliced through the air like a blade. "Justice Barrett, your argument crumbles when you strip it down to the facts. Facts you seem determined to ignore." The room froze. Barrett tried to respond with calm authority, reciting a precedent from decades earlier, but Crockett cut her off. "Quoting history doesn't erase the reality of today. You can't hide behind robes and centuries-old rulings when people's lives are on the line right now." The exchange escalated fast. Barrett insisted her reasoning was rooted in constitutional fidelity, her tone clipped and deliberate. But Crockett leaned forward, firing back with specifics that left little room for retreat. "You speak of fidelity to the Constitution, yet you twist its intent to justify outcomes that serve power, not people. Where in your text, Justice, do you find the authority to strip away protections Americans have fought and died for?" Barrett opened her mouth to reply, but Crockett's tempo only grew sharper. "Let me remind you," she pressed, "the Constitution was once used to defend slavery, to silence women, to deny equality. Tradition is not justice. Precedent is not morality. And if your only defense is that the past did it, then you've admitted your case has no future." Gasps swept through the chamber. The conservative members shifted uncomfortably while progressives leaned in, sensing blood. Barrett tried to restore control, citing the duty of the court to remain above politics, but Crockett's words landed with devastating force. "You claim neutrality, But neutrality in the face of injustice is complicity. And what you present here is complicity dressed in robes. The tension snapped like a wire. Supporters of Barrett muttered angrily, accusing Crockett of disrespect, while her allies erupted in murmurs of approval. Media commentators in the back exchanged glances, already drafting headlines in their minds. For Barrett, every attempt to defend her reasoning was met with Crockett's relentless dismantling, each phrase sharper than the last. The argument was no longer abstract, it was a duel, and Crockett was landing blow after blow. The breaking point came when Barrett, visibly rattled, tried one final defense. "Congresswoman, with respect, this court is guided by principle, not political passion." It was meant to be a dignified rebuke, a way to reclaim the authority of her robe, but Crockett didn't blink. She leaned into the microphone, her words sharp enough to silence the room. "Principle without humanity is nothing but empty power, and you've just proven that your so-called principles collapse the moment they meet the truth." The chamber erupted. Some gasped, some applauded, and others shouted in disbelief. Cameras zoomed in as Barrett froze, her lips parted but no words forming. The humiliation was total, not just because she had been challenged, but because the challenge cut so deep it left no space for recovery. For a long, unbearable second, the silence said everything. Crockett's phrase echoed in the room, already destined to loop endlessly on every news broadcast and social media feed. In that instant, the authority of a Supreme Court justice was shredded in full public view, and the nation watched as Barrett's composure slipped into stunned quiet. The climax was not just Crockett's devastating line. It was the realization that she had turned a hearing into a national spectacle. The moment crystallized. A congresswoman had humiliated a Supreme Court justice in real time, leaving her argument in ruins. The clip would go viral within minutes, replayed millions of times as the ultimate example of words wielded like weapons. The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the clip of Crockett dismantling Barrett dominated every network, replayed with captions like "Justice Shredded" and "Crockett strikes in seconds." Social media lit up with hashtags, memes, and endless commentary. Supporters of Crockett hailed her as a fearless truth-teller who refused to bow to the untouchable elite. "She spoke for all of us," one post read, shared millions of times. Meanwhile, Barrett's defenders scrambled to frame the exchange as disrespect toward the court itself, accusing Crockett of crossing a line. But the damage was done. The viral moment had stripped away the aura of invincibility surrounding Barrett, exposing her as fallible, even vulnerable, in a way the public had never witnessed before. Commentators across the spectrum debated what the clash symbolized. Some argued it was proof that the old guardians of authority could no longer hide behind tradition, while others warned that open humiliation of a justice risked eroding faith in the very institutions that held the nation together. Yet no one could deny that the balance of perception had shifted. Crockett had emerged not just as a politician, but as a force capable of shaking the pillars of power. In the weeks that followed, the moment remained etched in the national conversation. Late-night hosts joked about it, pundits dissected it, and classrooms even replayed it as an example of rhetoric colliding with raw conviction. Barrett's silence in the face of Crockett's final words became a symbol of what happens when authority meets unflinching truth. The final message was impossible to miss. America had witnessed a changing of the guard. A Supreme Court justice, cloaked in centuries of tradition, had been humiliated in seconds by a congresswoman who spoke with the fury of the present. And for millions watching, the memory of that confrontation would linger. A reminder that no seat, no title, no robe is beyond challenge when the truth is spoken with fearless clarity.